Hello, everybody. Joe Pometto, Joe the lawyer here. I wanted to provide some closing thoughts on the Derek Chauvin trial. So if you've watched my channel, I covered significant portions of the trial. I didn't hit all of it. Well, yesterday we got the verdict, and the verdict was guilty of all counts. Now, if you watched my verdict prediction episode, you would see that I predicted that Mr. Chauvin would be found guilty of all counts. Now, look, we're all biased to one degree or another, and I didn't watch the whole trial, but I tried to watch selected clips of the trial in order to take a non-biased and objective approach. And when I made my prediction, it was based on that. It was based on the evidence that was shown in the case. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes a little bit more, everybody, raise your cup, your glass in the air. You know on this channel that we do the same time sip. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. Okay, delicious. So, the prosecution put a good case together. They put multiple experts up, and they won the case, I think, largely on the expert testimony. The interesting thing here is they were allowed to call, I believe, six doctors. Some of that evidence was cumulative and unnecessary. And when you have multiple doctors saying the same thing over and over again, well, that may prejudice a jury one way or the other in an unfair way. I'm surprised the judge allowed them to have all four doctors. They called the ER doctor, the medical the medical examiner, and four other doctors. That actually surprised me a little bit. However, it is what it is at this point, right? The defense called one expert witness, one defense expert. I thought he should have called more. So the prosecution, they put together a good case. But this case was won. I think, before the trial began, and not for the reasons that perhaps you think. You may believe that the trial was won, and I'm not saying, look, this may have had significant influence, that the media coverage, the political environment, the protests and riots in 2020, all of that contributed to a foregone conclusion. Maybe, maybe not. In something this big, it's hard to pinpoint one reason or another. There's multiple reasons why things happen. However, I'm going to present this theory to you. The prosecution won this case before the trial, and it's not for that reason that I just stated. They won it because they correctly charged the defendant. And as I've harped on in many of my videos, they charged the defendant only with unintentional homicides. They charged the defendant only with unintentional homicides. That's right. They did not charge the defendant, and Derek Chauvin was not convicted of intentional homicide. Now, if he was convicted of if he was charged with intentional homicide, the prosecution would have had a much harder case to make. They would have had to say that he acted with premeditation, that he intended to kill Mr. Floyd. It was a much easier sell to say that he used excessive force, fell outside the bounds of police rules, acted with a depraved heart, or didn't pay enough attention to what was happening to Mr. Floyd. Therefore, it was an easy sell to say that Mr. Chauvin unintentionally caused Mr. Floyd's death, especially after the medical evidence that was presented. So keep that in mind. The prosecution won this case because they charged it correctly. I'm a criminal defense attorney. They don't charge every case correctly. They make mistakes all the time. They overcharge people, or they hit them with the wrong charge, and that can open things up for a defense attorney. However, as you know, the high profile of this case, they were much less likely to make a mistake like that. The interesting thing here, though, is that is that the statute still uses homicide and murder. So everybody can go around and they can say, oh, he murdered George Floyd, he murdered George Floyd, he was convicted of murdering George Floyd. And in the political sense, that's a win, okay, as far as putting that out there, because that's what a lot of people in this country wanted. Right or wrong, I'm not gonna make a value judgment here. That's what people wanted, and even the unintentional homicide gives that to the media, gives that to the people. But when I think of murder, when I think of homicide, usually in my mind, I'm thinking first degree, right? When I'm thinking of murder, I'm thinking that this person killed this person and wanted that person to die. That's usually the thought in my mind. But Derek Chauvin wasn't convicted of that. He was convicted of unintentional homicide. All 3 counts that he was convicted of were unintentional. And, you know, the thing here is somebody who hits a pedestrian with a vehicle and kills them could have been convicted of the same crimes that Derek Chauvin was, unintentional killing. That's not always true as far as the vehicle, but there's a lot of ways to perhaps unintentionally kill someone that don't seem maybe as vicious as what we saw here with Chauvin and George Floyd. So I think that's an important thing to think about, is that he was not convicted of an intentional crime. It was unintentional. And the fact that the prosecution charged it and thought very hard and long about how they charged it, and they charged it correctly, is likely why they got a conviction of all counts. And from a political standpoint, that was likely advantageous to the state of Minnesota, to most of the parties involved. You know, some other closing comments here. I don't think it's proper for politicians. Frankly, I don't like politicians commenting on trials and the judicial branch, period. I understand sometimes it can be called for, really big cases like this, really big decisions at the Supreme Court. For the most part, I want the equal branches of government to not go after each other. It's one thing for the president and Congress, they're elected officials, but for the executive branch and the legislative branch to go after the judicial branch, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm an attorney. I probably have some bias there. I will concede that after a decision, if a politician wants to weigh in, I thought about this long and hard, and I thought maybe the politicians should stay out, period. After a verdict, if they want to weigh in, fine. I don't think that that's improper. But I certainly think it's improper to weigh in before a verdict, before the verdict. And there were some politicians who did that here. My understanding is that Joe Biden did it only after they were sequestered. If he took that much care and only made the statements then I can respect that as well. However, I still think that the politicians should wait until the verdict comes out, and then they can offer their opinion. Anyone who offers an opinion prior to the verdict, I just think that that's improper. Some other things to know: the third-degree murder that Chauvin was convicted of, that type of third-degree murder only exists in 2 other states. And one of those states is Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Florida, which is very interesting. Now, some of the rules with homicide also do not allow the state to charge someone with 3 different types of homicide, as was done here with Chauvin. They have to pick and choose. But here, he was charged with all 3, and he was convicted of all 3. I picked the graphic that you see over here, to talk about appeals a little bit. I think there are a lot of appealable issues here. But for political reasons, I don't believe that an appeals court is going to overturn this conviction. Maybe years down the road, okay, but not anytime soon. For political reasons, this is a hot potato, okay? And sometimes the judicial branch is just going to step in and they're going to say no. Even if there's a good argument there. So it'll be interesting to see the exact arguments and then what the Minnesota Appeals Court takes on, what they don't, and how they decide. My prediction is Chauvin's not going to get any relief on appeal. And if he does, it'll be 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the road. Think about Bush v. Gore, right? At a certain point, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, no, for the good of the country, we're going to close this down. This is a different situation because we're talking about the life of a man, okay, a life of an individual. So I think you got to look really, really hard at this, and the appeals court should. And I'm not saying this is what they should do or shouldn't do. Frankly, I think they should look hard, and if there's a violation of law, they should take it into account just like this was any other trial. And if the appeals court feels that they need to overturn the conviction or do something one way or the other, I think they should do it. I don't think they will, though. You have to understand that even at the end of the day, the judicial branch, which is appointed, they're still political animals. They're still going to take into account the greater mood and greater politics in the country. And I think that could hurt Chauvin here on appeal. I don't think they'll tackle it on appeal. Interesting thing to watch going forward is going to be the trials of the co-defendant, the other people in this case, okay? They're going to be tried under maybe a form of accomplice liability. However, they're much further away from the death. It's going to be interesting legally. And I say further away from the death in the sense that Chauvin was, at least through the evidence shown at this trial, appeared to be the person who was applying the direct pressure that was stopping Mr. Floyd from breathing. And the other officers involved were less directly involved in applying that pressure, and I think that could play a role in how their cases are decided. Also, watch to see if some of them plea. At this point, because Chauvin was convicted, the state of Minnesota may be open to offering them plea deals, and then they could get convictions all across the board. They kind of got the big fish here. So they might offer plea deals that the other parties may be willing to take. So I'm going to put this to rest for the most part. I probably will stop back in, talk about the Chauvin trial whenever he is sentenced. But for now, I am pretty much done talking about the Chauvin trial. Had a rough day today, very long, very tired, got a rough week coming up ahead, so I'm going to hop out now. I know this was a quick live stream, but I wanted to let the people know who wanted to see it to jump in. I thought I was going to go for maybe a half an hour, but I'm telling you, I don't have a lot of people in the chat, and I am exhausted. If I was getting some chat love, I would probably stick around a little bit longer, but nobody's dropping me anything in the chat. And so, wait a minute, maybe I'm not. Interactive chat, you can open the chat, open in web browser. Maybe I didn't have the chat properly opened. I'm still learning a little bit. Yeah, nobody's commenting. Come on, people. I got some people in here. You guys got to comment. If you want to drop some questions, the viewers that I have, I'd be happy to answer them. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. I'm dying for some questions. 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to head out. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed these final thoughts. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. I predicted the conviction, and I got it right. I just kind of want to remind everybody to boost my ego. I got an ego. I do, but I'm also a humble guy. Seriously. All right. I love you guys, everybody.